camera, and I'm recording there. So, okay. So we're continuing with 2 Samuel here. We're on chapter 4, and we'll kind of see how far we get. But we're if we remember, there was a lot of what was that? 2 weeks ago now. There was a lot of consternation about David, and like there's someone that looked like he might be trying to trick him or not. It was kind of hard to tell. What was that guy's name? Abner or something like that. And so one of the tribe leaders ended up killing Abner, and so like I think the overall gist that we're supposed to get from that is, yeah, it's chaos. Like this one king has ended, and this is abnormal about what's happening with the ascent of David. Like it should be ascending to one of Saul's kids. That's how kings work. And so like this, I think we see that it being chaos is kind of here, and we're seeing that David is working through this. And I just realized that I didn't do something that I need to do real quick. Let's see, what is this called? Word of promise. I always have to remember what the Bible's. Come on. All right, let me make sure it's working. All right. And then we go to 2 Samuel chapter 4, 1. Let me make sure this was working. Yep. Sometimes it likes to sign me out, and that's super fun when that happens. Like that's okay. So we can go back to Zoom. All right. So we'll continue reading here, and we'll kind of see how David is continuing to unify the kingdom, because that's kind of one of the big things, one of the messianic outlooks of the reign of David is the unifying of the kingdom. So let's share the screen, and we'll listen to what's going on here. Optimize for video. I should have made it where there's no echo, but the people in Zoom, if there's an echo, let me know. Here we go.
When Saul's son heard that Abner had died in Hebron, he lost heart, and all Israel was troubled. Now Saul's son had 2 men who were captains of troops. The name of one was Baanah, and the name of the other Rechab, the sons of Rimmon the Beerothite, of the children of Benjamin. For Beeroth was also part of Benjamin, because the Beerothites fled to Gittaim, and have been sojourners there until this day. Jonathan, Saul's son, had a son who was lame in his feet. He was 5 years old when the news about Saul and Jonathan came from Jezreel. And his nurse took him up and fled. And it happened, as she made haste to flee, that he fell and became lame. His name was Mephibosheth. Then the sons of Rimmon, the Beerothite, Rechab and Baanah, set out and came at about the heat of the day to the house of Ishbosheth, who was lying on his bed at noon. And they came there all the way into the house as though to get wheat, and they stabbed him in the stomach. Then Rechab and Baanah his brother escaped. For when they came into the house, he was lying on his bed in his bedroom. Then they struck him and killed him, beheaded him, and took his head, and were all night escaping through the plain. And they brought the head of Ishbosheth to David at Hebron, and said to the king,
Here is the head of Ishbosheth, the son of Saul your enemy, who sought your life. And the Lord has avenged my lord the king this day of Saul and his descendants.
But David answered Rechab and Baanah his brother, the sons of Rimmon the Beerothite,
As the Lord lives, who has redeemed my life from all adversity, when someone told me, saying, Look, Saul is dead, thinking to have brought good news, I arrested him and had him executed in Ziklag. The one who thought I would give him a reward for his news. How much more, when wicked men have killed a righteous person in his own house, on his bed? Therefore, Shall I not now require his blood at your hand and remove you from the earth?
So David commanded his young men, and they executed them, cut off their hands and feet, and hanged them by the pool in Hebron. But they took the head of Ishbosheth and buried it in the tomb of Abner in Hebron.
All right. Well, we got pleasant stories abound in this chapter. Like that. That's so. What kind of stood out to you? There's really only one story here, but what kind of stood out to you here?
I have a question. Do you have any idea how many sons Saul had?
Ooh, not off the top of my head.
Let's have to Google that.
Let's ask. Hey, Google. Yeah. How many sons did King Saul? Oh, not Saul have. Let's see, what does it say? Saul married a daughter of Ahaz, with whom he sired at least 7 sons.
Oh, wow.
So let's see.
Yeah, you guys had
Jonathan,
other wives, probably.
Michal, and Ishbosheth. That seems to be like the big ones that are being mentioned. So like that's, yeah, so they're there.
Yeah.
Like I'm getting a lot of different, not answers, but nothing like.
And in the Jewish Bible, it says it makes certain you understand that the crippled one, he would not be eligible to be king because he's not perfect.
Really?
Yeah,
So Jonathan.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Because I was wondering about why it talked about him having bad feet.
So it said him, whatever his name, being crippled and therefore considered unfit to be king. So no offspring of Saul except Ishbosheth was left who could be king of Israel.
Okay. So that answers that question. Like that's so. All right. Well, that makes sense. This is just another example of me not doing my due diligence for a Bible study here. But hey, like if you can't tell, we're starting a new sermon series this Sunday. It's called Rise and Fall. We got the graphics package all done and all that stuff. But we're doing 1st and 2nd Samuel started on Sunday. So we need to finish this up before the end of June, because that's when that sermon series is done. But that's a good detail to know for that. So that's great. So that really answers that question about.
It's probably lucky too that nobody killed him.
Yeah, like Jonathan. Yeah. And so. Yeah. So then, what else? What else like kind of stood out to you there?
David is not taking any of these deaths as good news.
Yeah, which is utterly backwards. This and this, I think you're beginning to see how the scriptures, how the kingdom of God defines righteousness. It's this exact opposite of the powers of the world that we end up seeing at play in Jesus and all of this stuff. Because David should be rejoicing, and he's not. And it's not, and you can tell it's utterly consistent from when he could have killed Saul those few times. Yeah, like that's just expected. All of his men are like, the Lord has given you this, and yet David is like, I don't know, did the Lord give me this? Like that. That's and you kind of see like this way of the kingdom of God that I think, and I don't play into this a lot, but I think there's a deep part of us that finds human dignity calming. and good. And you see that David is leaning into that in here. And I think that's why we get so tired when people don't have any human dignity and all that. Even though there's a sinful side of us that loves it. They're like, take them out, all those things. But I think there's a deep sense of us, and it's our created self, I would call it, that human dignity. And so it's interesting because you could see it in all the patterns that are around even today, that so often people just take whatever little win they can get, and without like, oh yeah, I'll take an L, I'll take a loss if it continues to strive into that humage and that image of God, and we're gonna, and I think what we're gonna end up seeing is that that's actually how David unifies the kingdom. That's actually how it happens. And that's how it happens a lot of times. That's those that are just trying to win just for themselves will be the ruler of the next biggest ash heap,
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't matter what it is, business, relationships, like that. That's just what it is. So, but I have it underlined, that whole thing with David. I feel like I stole your thunder, Lee. Do I need to give your thunder back?
No.
Yeah, because that was the big thing that I said here. And back when we used to do the Bible study before the Ronas, we would listen to the Bible being read for 45 minutes, then talk about it for 15. And I had it underlined from that. And my note from that was, I called it David's righteousness. Like that just. And like, I love how what the King James says is like, what is that at the end of verse 9 is, as the Lord lives, who redeemed my life from all adversity. When someone told me about all this before, about the death, they thought they were going to receive a reward, and I didn't do that. So we're seeing David is acting backwards in a humanitarian way than anyone would expect. And I think it probably calms down the unrest, because they're like, this guy's he's not gonna prize me for causing dissension and causing chaos. And so I think that's good. I think it's good. And
kind of humanitarian, because he does kill him.
He does kill him. Like, which is, I think that is connected to like what I said at the beginning. Like, well, these are cheerful stories, but yeah. Like he does cut their heads off in kind of a gruesome way, like, and hangs them by the pool of Hebron, and
What's the reason for that? To hang them?
I have a feeling spectacle, like that. That's I think that's. You can get the word out fast, like that.
Happened to you.
Pastor,
Yeah.
the Jewish Bible says it's a humiliation when your hands and your feet are cut off.
Okay. Well, that would make sense of what we know about like Middle Eastern countries and how they punish people and all of that. So that would, where you lose hands and things like that. So humiliation thing. Okay. So yeah. Yeah. Oh no, it's awful. But it's interesting that he takes the head that was given as a trophy and he shows it dignity. Yeah. Which again is, and you got to think about like what's going on. There would still be people, probably the majority of the people were like, yeah, Saul's people should be king, like that's probably the majority of the people were feeling that way. And so you can imagine like, oh, this David is like showing honor to these people, and that's, that's probably, we don't know. We're looking in between the lines of the text there.
Is that why Abner took one of Saul's sons and made him king? Right along there, maybe it's in the next chapter or so, but
yeah,
Abner actually did that.
Yeah, that Ishbosheth, he anointed him king. I wondered with Abner, was it a power play for Abner because he was a strong military leader? And sounds like this Ishbosheth, he discouraged, he was kind of a weak guy. And Abner
Yeah. Well, and it was interesting how they described Ishbosheth's death, that he was in the bed, and there was no like security around him. There's no, and it says that they went in there like they were going to go get wheat, like that. That's verse 6. And they came there all the way into the house as though,
House there or something.
yeah, to get wheat. I mean, houses are different back then than the underhand. So they get wheat, and then they stabbed him in the stomach. So like he's unaware of people, like even in the thing. So remember, Abner's dead too, and so like that's and so. So I think maybe Abner was like setting him up as a puppet king, where he would rule underneath him, maybe, because it's all chaos and complex, like that's, and so that's, I think it's good to kind of let it be that, but kind of look at what's being said, kind of what they're saying about Ishbosheth, because it doesn't seem like he was like the best leader there. Yeah.
Pastor, on page 608, the Jewish Bible states that Abner actually dominated Ishbosheth.
He what?
Dominated.
Dominates, yeah. Oh, that's the verse 8 note, isn't it? Yeah. Abner, Saul's cousin, a strong man who dominates Ishbosheth.
But he's the real power.
Yeah, he's the real power. Yeah, or was. And so here, the Jewish Bible continues to be interesting here. So
I think Pastor Ed Scott should get a commission from Amazon on all these Jewish Bibles that are coming.
Yeah, keep on going. So it's so this is what it says here. So he dominates Ishbosheth, and so this is tedious and secondary form of that says it's tedious. That's tendentious. I don't know that word. And secondary form of the name Ishbaal. So Ishbaal, which means Baal exists, which would have been transformed into there is shame. The original form of the name preserved from the Greek. So they're basically saying that Saul's son was named Baal exists. So that's kind of an interesting kind of look at the language. I don't know.
But doesn't it say something but Baal wasn't the idol? Baal.
Yeah.
It's a different
like Lord or something like that.
Well, and that would have been so. Let's do my Middle Eastern language thing with so God is in Hebrew is Elohim. Okay, so and this is the Hebrews thing. If they have El. And then im is a plural ending. So they basically say gods whenever they're saying God. So Elohim is God. So im is a plural ending. The sound so Elah would be God singular. God singular. So you don't have to make a big jump to get into Arabic, where you have Allah. It's basically the same word, it's the same function and all that stuff. So then you have Baal, like you could hear it, right? It's doing that same work. It's just a variation of the language, of where you have kind of Lord and all these things. So there's translations that you got to be doing in these, because it's not our languages anymore. And so they so the Hebrews, they tried to make God as big as possible, so they made it plural. Because they were like, the Lord our gods. This is how they would say Deuteronomy. They would go, the Lord our gods is one.
Interesting.
And so they're just trying to make it sound bigger. And then they had what we think is Yahweh. But they would never say or write down Yahweh. We're guessing that that's what it was. Some of you have heard that God's name was Jehovah, where Jehovah came from, all the consonants are the same from Yahweh. But whenever it would, in the Bible, the way they would pronounce whenever they would see God's name written in the Hebrew scriptures, they would say Adonai, which means that's like father or something like that, I think. Ooh, I used to know that. It's a endearing term, Adonai, and so they used to say Adonai. So Adonai is the consonants from Yahweh, but given the vowels from Adonai, and that's where Jehovah came from, or Yehovah. So like that's where that came from. And the reason why you don't see Yehovah used anymore is because we realized that was probably incorrect. And so it's the vowels from Adonai onto the consonants, because we know the consonants, because they would write down the consonants of God's name, but they would never say it. So we're guessing that it's Yahweh. Yeah, so that's where all that stuff came from. It's just,
isn't that one way they study the Talmud, with all of that kind of word play?
Yeah.
Move letters around and get meaning out of some of them.
Yeah, they're trying to do. Yeah, that's one of the ways. There's always people trying to figure out, and that's the kind of thing where you can go too far with it, where you have people, that look and they're like, oh man, Jesus is coming back on September 14th. 2023, and that's them taking it too far. But there's definitely some, like, these are artistic books. These are artistic books, and they were playing games as they were writing them, and all this stuff. Because if they weren't artistic, we wouldn't be reading them. It would be just like when we read all those names. That's all that would be there. And so the fact that we're still reading this stuff from 3,000 years ago is big deal. And so, and I mean, because you think about the only thing that can compete with that time-wise is like the Odyssey, the Iliad, that's like those things, and we would definitely consider those to be works of art, and so bringing that in here, and that's why we continue to study this stuff and get better at it. All right, I've been preaching at you guys long enough. Let's go on to the next chapter. Chapter 5. Let's see what we get here. And share. Here we go.
Then all the tribes of Israel came to David at Hebron and spoke.
Indeed, we are your bone and your flesh. Also in time past, when Saul was king over us, you were the one who led Israel out and brought them in. And the Lord said to you, you shall shepherd my people Israel, and be ruler over Israel.
Therefore all the elders of Israel came to the king at Hebron, and King David made a covenant with them at Hebron before the Lord. And they anointed David king over Israel. David was 30 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 40 years. In Hebron he reigned over Judah 7 years and 6 months, and in Jerusalem he reigned 33 years over all Israel and Judah. And the king and his men went to Jerusalem against the Jebusites, the inhabitants of the land, who spoke to David.
You shall not come in here, but the blind and the lame will repel you. David cannot come in here.
Nevertheless, David took the stronghold of Zion, that is, the city of David. Now David said on that day,
whoever climbs up by way of the water shaft and defeats the Jebusites, the lame and the blind who are hated by David's soul, he shall be chief and captain.
Therefore they say, the blind and the lame shall not come into the house. Then David dwelt in the stronghold, and called it the city of David. And David built all around, from the Millo and inward. So David went on, and became great, and the Lord God of hosts was with him. Then Hiram, king of Tyre, sent messengers to David, and cedar trees, and carpenters and masons, and they built David a house. So David knew that the Lord had established him as king over Israel, and that he had exalted his kingdom for the sake of his people Israel. And David took more concubines and wives from Jerusalem, after he had come from Hebron. Also more sons and daughters were born to David. Now these are the names of those who were born to him in Jerusalem: Shammua, Shobab, Nathan, Solomon, Ibhar, Elishua, Nepheg, Japhiah, Elishama, Eliada, and Eliphalet. Now, when the Philistines heard that they had anointed David king over Israel, all the Philistines went up to search for David. And David heard of it, and went down to the stronghold. The Philistines also went and deployed themselves in the valley of Rephaim. So David inquired of the Lord,
Shall I go up against the Philistines? Will you deliver them into my hand?
Go up, for I will doubtless deliver the Philistines into your hand.
So David went to Baal Perazim, and David defeated them there. And he said,
The Lord has broken through my enemies before me, like a breakthrough of water.
Therefore he called the name of that place Baal Perazim. And they left their images there, and David and his men carried them away. Then the Philistines went up once again, and deployed themselves in the valley of Rephaim. Therefore David inquired of the Lord,
You shall not go up. Circle around behind them, and come upon them in front of the mulberry trees. And it shall be, when you hear the sound of marching in the tops of the mulberry trees, then you shall advance quickly, for then the Lord will go out before you to strike the camp of the Philistines.
And David did so, as the Lord commanded him. And he drove back the Philistines from Geba as far as Gezer.
Well, that's it.
Again.
Right now, that's it. All right. So what kind of stood out to you there? There's a lot of weird stuff. Probably needs to look at some notes on this. What did you think was interesting?
David always inquired of the Lord before he went into battle. He didn't see Saul doing that, really.
Yeah, I think and we see this as a consistent pattern with David.
Yeah.
And I think it's part of the righteousness of David is that Saul was always like just going in and then like seeking for better ask forgiveness than permission kind of thing. Where David is always willing to halt, it seems. Like he's definitely presented as like, should I go in, rather than just doing it. Yeah. I think I noticed that too. I think that's important to notice that. That's good. That's good. What else did you notice here? It seems like a lot of the unification is done. Like that's because there at the beginning of chapter 5, then all the tribes of Israel came to David in Hebron and spoke, saying, Indeed, we are the bone of your bone and flesh and of your flesh. Also in time past, Saul was king over us. You were the one who led Israel out and brought them in. And the Lord said to you, You shall shepherd my people Israel and be ruler over Israel. So it's the tribes have now come to him, and they are saying the same thing that the Lord was saying, that you are the shepherd, which is that king language of the people of Israel over us. So like that unification seems to be complete now, and we got our old pal the Philistines that were that we're kind of dealing with, and we see now the conquest of Jerusalem, like here, and this is why there's a bunch of stuff like verse 8 is bizarre. I still don't know. I wrote what next to it, and so like that's and I have a kind of a long note underneath it. Yeah. So like so 8 says, now David said on the way, whoever climbs up the water shaft and defeats the Jebusites, the lame and the blind, who are hated by David's soul. I don't know what that means. The lame and the blind who are hated by David's soul, he shall be chief and captain. Therefore they say, the blind and lame shall not come into the house. So the water shafts, does everyone know what the water shaft is? So it's, if you watch, generally speaking, if you watch some type of TV on the History Channel usually or something like that, during like Holy Week, there'll usually be a special on this that happens. And you probably watched it and didn't realize what it was. There are these tunnels that are dug from bodies of water upstream from Jerusalem that is like a pipe coming into the city. And the thing, they were viewed as these strongholds because they could, Jerusalem was very fortified, and it was near impossible to get it because they always had a water supply coming into the city. They basically diverted a river like into the place, type of thing. So that they probably went up through that, which was probably like pretty like ingenious thinking, like going up through that. And it's a very small thing. It's designed for water, very small thing. But I don't understand what the lame and blind have to do with it. So there's water shafts. Let's see.
My note in the NIV said David mocks the Jebusites' boast for verse 7, because the Jebusites, you can't come in here, even the blind and lame will attack you.
Oh, okay. So like that makes sense. That makes sense. I wasn't reading it in full context then. And okay, so they like. So they're like mocking them.
They thought the city was so strong, even the blind could.
Yeah.
That's probably that. Yeah.
And so the thing that we're in the sermon series, the main idea that we're dealing with, and we see it here, is we're calling it the rise and fall, and the whole idea with Hannah's prayer at the very beginning. Hannah was Samuel's mother. Is that she? It sounds like Mary's Magnificat, where it's like the Lord lifts up the humble but brings down the prideful and all that stuff. And it seems like that's kind of an encapsulation of that idea, that they were so prideful in the fortifications of the city that they probably kind of rested on that a little too much. Yeah, and so that's, so that like this, and that is a consistent idea throughout these two books. Yeah.
The Jewish Bible does poo-poo the water channel thing, though.
Does it? How does it poo-poo it?
It says it better translated windpipe.
Okay.
The efforts to connect this word to a structure that is part of the ancient water system of Jerusalem are unpersuasive and problematic. I guess crawling through that.
Yeah. Unpersuasive and problematic. That's funny. Like that's, and so you have that. Yeah. And so, but it's obviously something there. Like that's
somehow.
Yeah.
This commentary that I'm pulled up is saying the expression blind and lame applied to all the Jebusites, and the order to throw the slain down, the declivity was given in order to gain space for the hand-to-hand encounter in the fortress.
Okay. Yeah. So kind of like make it, well, and that's it, so like I could see that connected to to the previous idea where they're mocking them, like, it won't even be there, and it's like, well, they just like make space to conquer it. Yeah.
And from the note from the Jewish Bible, it has a cross reference of 1 Chronicles 11, 4-6, which talks about David taking Jerusalem. And David said, "Whoever strikes the Jebusites first shall be chief and commander." And Joab, was the first. So it doesn't, that's their problematic, unpersuasive. It doesn't mention.
Oh, it doesn't mention in Chronicles.
Blamed and lame.
So
in the Chronicles account of him taking Jerusalem.
Okay, so let's talk about Chronicles for a second. So Chronicles basically is 1st and 2nd Kings. Is 1st and 2nd Chronicles. It's the same stories. Now, there's some things at the beginning of Chronicles that goes into some of the Samuel's thing. But what Chronicles is 1st and 2nd Kings and 1st and 2nd Samuel, obviously. Like those, they're older. And Chronicles was written after the Babylonian captivity. And so it's written after, and it's written as this history that's written, and it's almost like with some afterthought. It was like, like this probably wasn't as good as it could have been. Like that's like all those things. But they're basically, especially 1st and 2nd Kings and 1st and 2nd Chronicles are like mirrors of each other. But some of the things that 1st and 2nd Kings calls righteous, Chronicles does not. So like that's, yeah, so like that is, it's kind of like some after stuff that kind of going on there. So that's, it would make sense as to why, if that story was in there. Yeah. And so it's, yeah. Okay. Let's see, what was there anything else that stood out? Let's see. I have. Oh yeah. So we already mentioned that about David inquiring of the Lord, and all of that. So let's do another chapter here. And one of my headings that I wrote the last time we went through this was weird on this one. So we'll see what that is. We'll see what that is. And so all right.
Again, David gathered all the choice men of Israel, 30,000. And David arose and went with all the people who were with him from Baale-Judah to bring up from there the ark of God, whose name is called by the name the Lord of Hosts, who dwells between the cherubim. So they set the ark of God on a new cart and brought it out of the house of Abinadab, which was on the hill. And Uzzah and Ahio, the sons of Abinadab, drove the new cart. And they brought it out of the house of Abinadab, which was on the hill, accompanying the ark of God. And Ahio went before the ark. Then David and all the house of Israel played music before the Lord on all kinds of instruments of fir wood, on harps, on stringed instruments, on tambourines, on sistrums, and on cymbals. And when they came to Nachon's threshing floor, Uzzah put out his hand to the ark of God and took hold of it, for the oxen stumbled. Then the anger of the Lord was aroused against Uzzah, and God struck him there for his error. And he died there by the ark of God. And David became angry because of the Lord's outbreak against Uzzah. And he called the name of the place Perez Uzzah to this day. David was afraid of the Lord that day.
How can the ark of the Lord come to me?
So David would not move the ark of the Lord with him into the city of David. But David took it aside into the house of Obed-Edom, the Gittite. The ark of the Lord remained in the house of Obed-Edom the Gittite 3 months. And the Lord blessed Obed-Edom and all his household. Now it was told King David,
"The Lord has blessed the house of Obed-Edom and all that belongs to him, because of the ark of God."
So David went and brought up the ark of God from the house of Obed-Edom to the city of David with gladness. And so it was, when those bearing the ark of the Lord had gone 6 paces, that he sacrificed oxen and fatted sheep. Then David danced before the Lord with all his might, and David was wearing a linen ephod. So David and all the house of Israel brought up the ark of the Lord with shouting and with the sound of the trumpet. Now as the ark of the Lord came into the city of David, Michal, Saul's daughter, looked through a window and saw King David leaping and whirling before the Lord, and she despised him in her heart. So they brought the ark of the Lord and set it in its place in the midst of the tabernacle that David had erected for it. Then David offered burnt offerings and peace offerings before the Lord. And when David had finished offering burnt offerings and peace offerings, he blessed the people in the name of the Lord of hosts. Then he distributed among all the people, among the whole multitude of Israel, both the women and the men, to everyone a loaf of bread, a piece of meat, and a cake of raisins. So all the people departed, everyone to his house. Then David returned to bless his household. And Michal, the daughter of Saul, came out to meet David.
How glorious was the King of Israel today, uncovering himself today in the eyes of the maids of his servants, as one of the base fellows shamelessly uncovers himself.
It was before the Lord, who chose me instead of your father and all his house, to appoint me ruler over the people of the Lord, over Israel. Therefore I will play music before the Lord, and I will be even more undignified than this, and will be humble in my own sight. But as for the maidservants of whom you have spoken, by them I will be held in honor.
Therefore Michal, the daughter of Saul, had no children to the day of her death.
There's probably a couple of reasons you could read that.
I have a headache.
yeah, like that's like it's all right. So all right. So there's some weird stuff going on in this one, and I want to look at some. So all right, what stood out? What stood out? We may go over time a little bit here because this one is very special. This one's very special.
Well, I didn't quite understand. The guy was trying to keep the cart from falling down.
Yeah.
And he tries to, that's a common thing, right? Pick it up or hold it, and then he gets killed. Okay, that's a little much.
Yeah, it's definitely weird. It's definitely weird.
Pretty explicit directions how that ark should be handled.
Yeah.
They did it their way.
So they should have let it fall?
He had good
intentions, but he didn't do it properly.
Yeah, in the note it says something about NIV. As a priest, Uzziah ignored God's command with regard to moving the ark and followed the way of the Philistines. Regardless of how well-intentioned Uzziah was, his actions were neither guided nor limited by God's word.
Okay, so all right, so maybe it's the new cart language.
Yeah, maybe there's a.
Let's see here. Okay, so
The Philistines tried to move it, they had almost the same problem.
okay, so they're calling this Bible's calling back to 1 Samuel chapter 6, verse 7. Let's see here. And they're saying this all looked like the Philistines, what they did. So now therefore make a new cart. Let's see, this is when the Philistines, when they had it, let's see. take 2 milk cows,
Yes, when the cows.
which had never been yoked, hitched to the cows of the cart, and take their calves home. Oh yeah, so they just put it on the ark, and the cows just made it home. And so they, like, he should have never been there, is what this is saying. So
The original instructions required that the ark be carried on the shoulders of the Levites.
okay. So at the beginning of 1 Samuel, the Philistines take the ark at one point, and let's see, then that's when they got all those golden tumors and all that stuff.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And let's see. So I'll just read this. So this is chapter 6 of 1 Samuel. When did you harden your hearts as the Egyptians and Pharaoh hardened their hearts? When he did mighty things among them, did they not let the people go and they might depart? Now therefore make a new cart, take 2 milk cows which have never been yoked, and hitch the cows to the cart and take their calves home away from them. Then take the ark of the Lord and set it on the cart, and put the articles of gold in which you're returning to him as trespass offering in a chest by its side. Then send it away and let it go, and watch. If it goes up the road on its own territory to Beth Shemesh, then it has done us this great evil. But if not, then we shall know that it is not by the hand that struck us. So basically, they took the 2 milk cows, hitched it to the cart, and they set the ark of the Lord to the cart, and the chest and the gold rats and the tumors, and the cows headed straight to where they were supposed to go. So I think it's kind of saying, it's kind of a weird, it's like a weird test, but it's that kind of, it must be calling back to like, hey, like, God will take his ark to where he wants it. And yeah, Lee?
Okay, the Jewish Bible.
They were farmers,
Six-
understand
6 and
that.
8.
They would go after their calf. They wouldn't take that ark down the road.
Yeah, they wouldn't
Go
take
back
it
to the
down.
barn, find their baby.
Yeah. You were very quiet there at first, Lee.
Okay, 6 to 8. It says, touching the sacred object loaded with awesome divine power is fraught with danger. Is it that God struck him dead, or is it that the ark contained such power that if a human touched it, it could cause a massive heart attack or just...
Well, as we know from the sacred documents that is Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, you don't need to open up the ark, and all those things, that's. So there's also, all right, we'll have a conversation about this for a second too. There's also the whole thing that it's odd just that the ark is around. Like that's the ark, we could tell, is very special, but it's kind of weird. And this is a question that kind of goes unanswered, but where it kind of feels like imagey thing, where it's like this other image of God. And so, but it's also one of the things that rests in the Holy of Holies, and that's, we think about how important that Holy of Holies area is in the temple, that, only one priest once a year goes in there. And, so there's a lot going on there. And so, and if that ark stumble, it makes a big deal out of the oxen stumbling there. And, if we see the precedent where these milk cows, who were obviously had just had babies, and that God was able to lead them, they make a big deal out of those oxen stumbling. And we may be getting like the first little hint of the way of worshiping God isn't as good as it could be. And you see that David may kind of overcome this by looking very undignified as he dances all around in his underwear, dancing all around there, and so much so that Michael cannot stand him.
But when they were in the desert, they never touched that ark when they were moving it because they had those gold poles.
Yeah.
They could only pick it up by those poles.
Yeah. They could only touch it by the poles.
They never was supposed to touch it.
So you have what Diane read about the Levites. So it seems like they may not have been transporting it in an approved manner.
That they were supposed to.
Yeah. And so it's weird. It's weird. And I think, my old adage, when you see something in the Bible that's weird, let it be weird.
Yeah.
Like that's, and this is one of those things that we can work to try to figure it out, but like, it's so odd. And maybe, like the author's intent and like conveying the story the way they are here is like that it looks like David is manipulating God maybe, or something like that David is just 100% on God's side and all of that, but God is still bigger than all of these things. Like that's still can't be controlled, and is kind of that old C.S. Lewis line, where from The Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, where they were like, is they looked at Aslan the lion, like, is he safe? They're like, no, he's not safe, but he's good, type of thing. That idea may be coming across here. I'm not sure, but we see what David does, because he obviously looked ridiculous. That's how we're supposed to get conveyed in the story, because Michael is very upset about it. He obviously looked ridiculous, and
the whole thing is okay. So he gets mad at God. He leaves the ark at somebody's house.
Yeah.
Okay, because he's mad.
Yeah.
Then he goes back to his own house,
Yeah.
and the only reason he goes back to get it is because the other guy's being blessed.
Yeah.
Okay, so now is all that dancing around just to prove to God that I'm happy or whatever?
I don't know.
There's nothing in these notes that says anything.
He's wearing the ephod, which would be what the priest would wear, and those things. That's also in the sacred text of Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. They put on the ephod too. If you notice that in that movie, and so the sacred text like that's but yeah, it's kind of weird. The one thing that I had about Michael that this kind of turned into me listening to her talk about all this is it sounded like the Pharisees with Jesus, that they were just trying to catch him on something, anything like this, and just sometimes people get so frustrated with something we're doing, or maybe we kind of get on this too, where you get so mad at somebody and frustrated at what they're doing that everything they're doing is wrong, and you're just trying to catch them into something, anything that'll stick, and so it seems like that's what Michael is trying to do with David.
And it says here too, it prevents any of Saul's bloodline being eligible to be on the throne.
Oh, with Michael. Yeah. That's true. That's a good point as well. So he puts on this ephod and he looks ridiculous running around there, but that's what he gives. I immediately remember in verse 19. He says, then he distributed among all the people of Israel, among the whole multitude of Israel, both women and men, to everyone a loaf of bread, a piece of meat, and a cake of raisins. And all the people departed with everyone's house. When we were going through, this was right before Rome. No, it wasn't. It was like a year. I made a joke at the beginning of service that I just found that I like raisin bread. And I just found out that I like raisin bread, and
It's good stuff.
and I guess, and I had like the loaf of it, and it was Kevin was doing announcements in the front, and then like I had something planned where later on in the service we read, like during the reading, it talked about how bad raisin cakes were. Or something like that. It was like in, I think it's in, I don't know, I think it's with Elijah or something like that. And I threw the bread, like during the reading. Like I was like, what? And then I threw the bread. So I did this during a service. I remember doing that. But so that just reminded me of that. It's a funny memory for me. Was there anything else from chapter 6?
Why did he name it the city of David?
Do what?
Why did David name it the city of David?
Did he name it that?
You know, he's been so humble. That was from the chapter before.
It's true. It's true. That's a funny observation. Why didn't they just keep the name of Jerusalem?
No, I mean he's been so humble this whole time. I didn't want to be king. You know, God gave it to me. I didn't want anybody dead. And okay, now we we conquered the city, and now we're going to call it David.
Good point. Yeah, this seems like an odd thing to bring up right now, but we've been talking to the board for a while. We're going to call this Chris Lutheran Church.
I think it's a sign of a crack in his armor.
Yeah, it could be. Because we've been talking about like that. It's just kind of bringing in these things that could be. I didn't think about that. I didn't think.
Well, in the Christmas story, Bethlehem is known as the city of David.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
yeah.
Maybe now we're into the big leagues.
Yeah. Maybe. I don't know. Like that's interesting. That's interesting about. That it could be like we're seeing some pride come in, because it's not far until we get to Bathsheba. Like we're not far away from that. Yeah, that's chapter 11. Like we're coming on that quickly, and so
he's talking to God. He asks God before he does anything. Then someone gets killed by the ark. And now all of a sudden he's afraid of God. He's afraid of the ark.
Yeah.
And he dumps it on somebody else. And then when it's okay, all right, now I know it's okay. Now bring it back. It's like this perfect person isn't quite as perfect as we think he is.
Yeah. Yeah. Like that. You're
like all of us.
Yeah. Kind of like all of us. Yeah.
Sounds like current politics.
Yeah. Like and I think what you're seeing is you see this rise of David now, and you just see, just like we talked about with Saul, we're seeing some of the chinks in the armor, and so that could be what this is, and that's very interesting. That's very interesting. Yeah, like that's good. That's good. And like the big part of that is Bathsheba, and we end up seeing David doing something that is different than what Saul would have done, and all of that. So. But remember, like David does have a pretty big fall. So, all right. Well, I think that's a good point to end on. I wasn't even anywhere near there. I think that's a good observation. And it fits with the overall gist. But good deal. So everyone that's watching on the pre-recorded YouTube, thanks for watching.